call today. We are going to be talking about partnerships. This is probably, I think, right up at the top of the conversations or the topics that I get super excited about when I have the opportunity to talk about. And the reason for it is because I know how powerful a good, healthy partnership can be. It was interesting in preparation for the call today. We were looking at some of the statistics that are out there, and what we see is that when a partnership is working well, when you put into place all of the right components to make sure that the partnership is going to be a successful one, those kind of companies, according to the statistics, will see they typically generate 30% more revenue. They are far more successful. They typically don't make mistakes or errors in the direction of the company as quickly or as often as those that are run by single solopreneurs. There are just so many components about that drive success for a business that has a healthy partnership. Now, on the flip side, the statistics also tell us that 70% of partnerships fail miserably. So the rewards are great when you get it right. But when you don't get it right, far too many don't get it right, and as a result, they really do struggle, and they see failure as a result. I think I can say this with confidence, and I'm always careful. Recognize I don't want to sound too cocky here, but I think we get it right at Rhapsody. One of the things that I take a lot of pride in, and I know in our conversations for Eric and Trevor and I, when we've had conversations with our coach, one of the things that our coach will say to us almost every single time we get together, they'll make the comment and say, you realize you guys have something really special here, that you have put into place, and it's been deliberate. It hasn't happened by accident. It hasn't just kind of fallen together that we've been like, oh, gee, look, we've got this great partnership. No, there's been a lot of work. And what we want to do today is we want to unpack some of that with you. We're going to take some time today. And for those of you that have been part of some of these webinars in the past, you'll know that our typical kind of the way we approach things is the first 25 minutes or so is going to be the topic. And then we open it up for just conversation, and we invite everybody to bring their own insight and thoughts to the table. At the same time, at any point, starting right now in the chat window, you can type out if you've got some questions or comments, or if something stands out, you want to make a note of it, you can put it in the chat window so that others pick up on it. As well as for those watching live on Facebook, you can use the chat component there as well, and you can post anything that any questions that you might have. Trevor is monitoring that as well as being part of the conversation today, and he'll add those components or those questions or comments into the conversation as well. But I really feel like today, unlike others where we just kind of, my job as the host is to lead with certain questions and really kind of drive the topic. This is a topic where I think I've already kind of got the agreement. So this webinar will likely last about 6 hours. And it's just because this is going to be a lot of just casual conversation. What I've really talked to with Eric and Trev is that we'll just have a conversation and talk about what works, some of the things that we have put into place to make the partnership that we have work well, some practical steps that you could implement if you're looking to strengthen the partnership that you have, if you're working in a partnership as well. And so we're going to kind of dive into that. But maybe Eric and Trev will start out with just really defining what we mean by partnership, and then just some initial thoughts, and then let's just let the conversation flow from that. But maybe Eric, I'll start with you since I see you're unmuted. Maybe you can jump in with just, when we talk about a partnership, what are some things that come to mind? How would you define or how would you describe a partnership?
Well, I mean, it goes far beyond. Good to see everybody, by the way. Always great to have you on the call. When you talk about partnerships, this obviously applies to the traditional business partnership where you've got a multi-owner type situation, whether that's a family situation where you've got multiple family members or not. But really, it also applies to leadership teams. It's not limited to just owners. I think the principles we're going to talk about here today are foundational to just healthy working relationships, high performing teams with obviously the focus being on the special dynamics that come into play when it's a multi-owner situation. But I'm going to say this, we're going to talk about it more and more, but you're going to hear over and over and over again the words deliberate, the words intentional, the words communication, that these things are absolutely essential because no one gets into a business relationship or a personal one to fail. We always go in with high expectations and desires for things to work out, but it often does not, and it often comes down to the same elements or ingredients that are missing or insufficient. So we're going to get a chance to explore some of those today.
Yeah, absolutely. Trev, what about you? How would you define it and some of the first thoughts?
Well, some of my first thoughts. I mean, one is I'm also the guy who, at one point in his life, swore he would never be part of a business partnership again. So I know I'm not the only one who has been through and could tell you stories about how bad they can be, and by virtue of our role, there are a number of situations where we've seen them as well. We're working with clients as they're trying to navigate their way through it. So you don't have to have lived it firsthand, but boy, that leaves the mark for sure. And so to enter into a partnership after that was not an automatic thing or an easy thing or golly, that sounds like fun. That was like, oh, I don't know. I think so, and you have to really want that. I think there's some language that gets used sometimes. People will make reference to their business relationships almost like marriages or other relationships as well. And while I find that description a little weird, I also find it really apt, right? It's also very true in so many ways, right? You think about it may be the closest thing there is to a long-term relationship or a marriage out there, because you've got this notion of entering into a long-term commitment. Very often there are dependents, there are assets, there's an expectation it will go on forever. It's a highly emotionally charged experience in relationship, and it's based, and we were chatting about this a little bit before, in this notion of covenants, in promises. And very often the covenant of a partnership is the shareholders agreement. And we've run into a whole series of situations where the covenant isn't even in place and people are like going ahead with this. And so, these are difficult to do, which is why, to Eric's point, I couldn't agree more. This notion that you have to be deliberate, you have to be intentional. That communication has to happen at a whole other level. And it demands more of us, I think, individually, within a partnership context than perhaps any other work relationship that we have, just because the nature of that relationship, that shared ownership, as well as leadership, as well as all of the other elements that are playing out at the same time. So I guess those are my first thoughts there, Rob.
One of the things, and of course, where we are unique, not all partnerships are also strong friendships, and we have a strong friendship, and I want to kind of get that off the table kind of at the start. Let's talk about that for a few minutes, and then we can dive into what is probably more common, which is partnerships that are around, other areas, but maybe they're not necessarily hanging out regularly socially. We do that, and we certainly are good friends. And I remember, I think it was 2 years ago, I think it was in 2019, maybe it was 2020, in our when we met for strategic planning, we did a SWOT analysis. And one of the things that we weighed out as being the greatest threat as well as greatest opportunity for the company was our relationship, was the partnership. And we recognize the importance of keeping that strong. And Eric, maybe I'll get you to start with this, because we talked at that time about the idea that we need to protect the friendship, but we also need to protect, in many ways, the business from the friendship. So when you're in a partnership, the dynamic of being friends, running a business together, what are some of the unique things and stuff we should be aware of when it comes to that kind of a relationship? And then let's talk about, just in general terms, partnerships, but maybe just address that for a second.
I think in many ways, Rob, I mean, you raised a great point there. The friends in business, it's very similar to family in business, and how the pressures of the organization and running the organization can, if one is not careful, quite often can fracture and damage the family or friend relationship. So you have to be very deliberate to structure your conversations, your systems, how you're going to operate to preserve, if the relationship matters, to preserve those relationships. And we've been very, very deliberate about that. The flip side of it is you also have to protect the partnership from the friendship. And this is where we compromise on what the business needs because we don't want to perhaps step on toes of a family member or a friend. So again, it's a two-way street where without deliberate intent, I mean, we business owners will plan so many other areas of their business and yet leave this one to chance. Let's just hope this works out, you know, you can't leave it to chance. This is, again, the potential is in that relationship being successful and being successful over the long haul. I'll say one more thing in that some people get into business because they're friends. For guys, it's a tricky thing. There's all kinds of research around. There's a lot of guys that don't have adult males that don't have really meaningful relationships. Most of their relationships are about, did you see the game the other night, or what are you driving these days, and how's business? Very superficial, and it's kind of the buddy camaraderie thing. But there's not true friendship taking place. One of the things I'm most grateful for is that my two best friends in the whole wide world are on this call. And we not only do business really well together, and that's not been easy. We've had many storms we've had to navigate, but we do life together as well. And so that's probably what makes this particular our particular partnership a little bit more unique than the average one, is that we're not just collegial, we're really close friends.
Trev, anything to add to that? Do you think we're close friends?
Yeah, I mean, first off, whoa, we're friends. This is a whole.
We're friends.
I was hoping.
I didn't get the memo.
Yeah, I think this is tough work to do. The odds of getting sustained results from a partnership that is poorly constructed, extraordinarily difficult. Like, they're extraordinarily low to get good sustained results. Now you can absolutely. You can see it. I have a consulting background. I've come through, some of the big firms. You see the partnerships there, partnership model straight up. And those partnerships, they're not all friends. And some of them don't like each other at all. In fact, it's not that they're friends, it's their enemies, right? And so you can see these dynamics playing out. And what's interesting is it's very difficult to sustain positive, meaningful results long term if you don't have a solid, strong relationship at the partnership at the core. Now, can you do it? Yes, but it comes at an extraordinary cost. Right? You're going to sacrifice a whole series of other things, and probably you're going to leave a lot of money on the table as well. So for those who say, I'm in it about the money, well, then the smart money is get the relationship right, figure out how to do the partnership right, because it produces better results. So even for those who aren't in a friendship, and you don't need to be, you can say,
That's
I'm
right.
in a professional business relationship with this person. You need to get a bunch of core things right if you want to actually get the results that you're after, like that 30%, that 20%, those bumps that Rob described at the beginning, and not end up on the other side of the ledger, which is 70% of these things that collapsed. And so I think, it starts to bring us into what's the effort that's required here in order to pull it off, because we see when a partnership dissolves, when it collapses, the business tends to go with it.
Right.
So it can be one thing where, if I don't like you and we're both VPs of something and working on it, and one of us will change jobs, business is fine. Or both of us change jobs, or both of us leave. The organization is still fine. The partnership, though, if that falls, it all falls. And so really keeping the focus there is critical.
So
let's just unpack that a little bit more, if we might. I mean, the reality is, think of a family unit. If the parents, if their relationship is really unhealthy, it is really hard for that to not impact the children in a negative way. It's going to impact the whole family dynamic if the relationship at the top of the family unit isn't healthy. So it's the same. Again, to Trevor, to your point, can an organization succeed and operate? Yep, they can. We see it all the time. But it's how much potential is being left on the table. What is the price, or what are the costs that the organization is paying on a regular basis for the dysfunction at the top, right? And again, we're not advocating for business partnerships to all, be best friends. That's not what we're advocating. What we're saying is it's the intentional focus on the quality of the relationship, on clarity of roles, on clarity of expectations, on your systems and processes, all designed to support healthy, open conversations that prevent many of the problems from showing up and rearing their ugly head, and again, impacting everybody in the organization, right? If the leadership at the top is unhealthy, the organization is going to be unhealthy.
So let's get really practical. We got about 10 minutes, 12 minutes for this conversation, and I want us to get really practical. Whether it's a professional relationship, the partnership has come in where they're just really seeing that it makes sense to do this together as a firm, whether it's friends that have started a business together, couples, we have a number of clients who are married and trying to do this. There are some best practices. We use the word sophisticated often at Rhapsody, and we used it in introducing and promoting this. What does a sophisticated partnership look like? So what would be some really practical, and Trev, I'll start with you, but let's just start to unpack some really practical things that people should be implementing or should be in place for a partnership to be at that level of sophistication.
Yeah, I think parking your ego at the door is critical. I mean, I think it's such an essential piece. And there's an organization that's working with. They've got a new partner in there, and so he's become an owner. And what we're navigating right now is the difference between ownership, partnership, and leadership. And in some ways, this individual is starting to treat their new ownership partnership role as a bit of a license for their behavior. Say, well, yeah, but I'm an owner. And so the rules are different. And I've had to gently say, yes, the expectations are different. The expectations are higher.
Right.
This is not a license to say stuff doesn't apply to me. This is a license now to say, I set the standards across this organization, and how we do this partnership and how we do this leadership is going to affect everything. So in some ways, it's making sure it doesn't become like the ego kicks in and go, I'm an owner. I'm like, yeah, I own IBM stock. That doesn't mean I have license to behave a particular way in the halls of IBM as I'm cruising around, right? So there's a real distinction there, and I think it's a critical first step to just set those aside.
Yeah, that's a great place to start.
And another place to look at is very practical. One of the most frequent, so what I'm looking for, obstacles to a healthy partnership is unrealized or unmet expectations, where in a partnership situation, one feels that they're overperforming and that others are underperforming, that there's no clear roles defined beyond the function that each of those leaders performs in the business. What about their leadership role and their leadership responsibilities as a partner and as an owner? That's often not, we work with so many organizations that still struggle just to have clear roles for their people, right? So even their people are in the fog about, well, what is my job? And where are the lines for me to color within or even color outside? I don't even know where the lines are. Well, we see it in partnerships. That's pretty common. There are no clear roles defined among the partners. There's no guiding principles that have been defined around how we're going to make decisions and what happens when we don't agree and how are we going to deal with that, and what if I've got an issue with another partner? How are we going to deal with that? And so with lack of structure, without these things being clarified, it's like driving a race car into pea soup fog, and when you hit the fog, you hit the gas and go faster. Like how foolish is that? You wouldn't do that. You would hit the brakes and slow down. You want to get rid of the fog around these issues. We not only implemented roles and clarified expectations, that led to some really difficult conversations between us. We even annually hold performance reviews on each other. Because we feel, again, if we're expecting our team members to go through this, right, where we're going to sit down, we're going to talk about what's going well, where we'd like to see some improvement, help them get into action around it, that leadership needs to be, or that example needs to be set from the top. So again, it comes back to deliberately building your systems, your processes, Trevor, talk to us even about our meetings and how those are structured.
Yeah. It's, I mean, you really have to choose everything. So you can look organizationally and say, well, as an organization, we need to have strategy meetings. You go, we need to have tactical meetings. Honestly, if you stop there and just do those two things, your organization will be better. Okay, so do that. Don't mix them up. There, I've got that off my chest. The other thing we do is, you know, those elements coupled with what Eric just described keeps us on track in terms of how we deliver our roles and our functions with clarity. But so much of the reason that partners don't is because they don't want to sit in the discomfort of those conversations.
Right.
And so, you know, they're not talking about how, you know, what's our roles here, because they don't want to bring it up because they know it's going to be uncomfortable. And that discomfort is too much for them at that point in time. And so what happens is we have a series of other meetings that help us maintain the relationship as we work through it. So you know, COVID has made it a little bit different. So let's pretend we're in a normal world here a little bit. But you know, we will get together monthly for the three of us to meet and actually work on a project. We get together monthly just socially, and we tend to get away quarterly to step back. And some of those are our strategic conversations, and some of those are just space to think things through and have conversations in a different context and at a different pace. But what's interesting with those, if I go back to my example of partnerships where the partners even hate each other, they're enemies, even those partners all agree to go away together because they know it's the right thing to do. So right. Even if they don't like each other, it's not even about the relationship, it's about the functioning of the partnership to have the space to have necessary conversations to do it. And if over time they can strengthen their capacity to have conversations that are more uncomfortable in the short term, uncomfortable but not unsafe,
right?
So uncomfortable in the situation but not unsafe in the relationship, then that's where real transformation starts to happen, right? This is where things really start to grow. Without the space for those conversations, the odds of that happening are almost nil.
Yeah, and I think also in that context of with the conversations and making them safe is also the respecting and acknowledging of the different personalities that come to the table. We all come with different styles. We all come with a different level of energy. We come with a different perspective, and we really do. And we use DISC, of course, as a tool to help us understand observable behavior. But to be able to recognize that, you know, I may communicate differently than Trevor or of Eric, and how we create an environment where we allow for the difference in communication styles to come into play is so critical as well. Now we're almost at where we're going to give our kind of a wrap up. So, and I know Eric, you want to jump in. I'm going to let you go first. Here's what I'm going to suggest, because there's so much, and I meant it, folks, when I said we could go for 6 hours here. So I'm gonna challenge you. Rapid fire, bullet form, summary statements. What are some of the other things that should be in the components? Let's throw those out. Steve and Catherine are doing a great job already throwing notes into the chat window. They're going to try to capture these as we throw them out, but let's spend 2-3 minutes just rapid fire. What are some other components that need to be there for a sophisticated partnership? Eric.
Two of them that stand out for me is make space regularly, build systems to check in with each other as partners. In our leadership team meetings, one of the agenda items is we all look at each other and say, are we okay? Has anything happened since the last meeting that we need to talk about because it impacts the relationship? That's how committed we are to this. The other is a commitment to eliminate shadow forces. The unspoken wields tremendous power from the shadows. And so if I'm at odds with Trev, let's say, and I don't say anything to him, he's going to feel it. What he feels, he's going to interpret. And most of the time, what he interprets will be incorrect. The unspoken wields terrible power in our organizations, and we have to push past it, no matter how uncomfortable it is.
Oh, those are good. Trev.
The organization will never perform at a level stronger than the partnership, ever.
Right.
So if you're looking to improve your performance organizationally, you start with yourself and your partners, right? And say, are we doing this with integrity? Are we doing this? And I would say it starts with our personal accountability. I would start with the question, what kind of partner am I?
Right.
How good of a partner am I? Am I playing to the strengths of my partners? Am I really committed? Am I really delivering what I need to? And these are questions where these are the critical ones as we go through in terms of that accountability piece and being able to hold ourselves accountable. And then the second part that goes with it is bring out the best in your partners. Bring out the best in your partners. Great Brazilian soccer player, practices for hours. He's a midfielder. He practices for hours passing to the strikers because he knows exactly how they like to have the ball delivered to them based on who they are, not on how he likes to kick the ball. And he spends hours with mannequins passing directly to them so that when it's his turn to interact with them, they're getting it in the best possible way. He's setting them up for success.
Steve frames a great question that he just posted in the chat, and this is going to tie into let's do a wrap up. And again, folks, do encourage you, if you have some time, to stick around. The call is going to end in a couple of minutes, and then we're just going to open it up to really let you share your thoughts and comments, and as well as to share some questions, those of you that are on the Zoom call. But there are some that are going to say, okay, this is great, but my partnership is already, it's a mess. It's not working. I don't know where to go, or even just how do I get my partner to engage in this? What's the starting point for those that are in that place of saying, I'm just not sure, what this partnership's about?
If you're in trouble, chances are you're not going to get out of trouble on your own. This would be no different than a couple whose communication is broken down and they are just kind of circling the drain, caught in habits that are not healthy. Chances are, without some outside intervention and help, they're not going to find their way out of it. So you need to be looking externally to bring someone in to help you. Now, if your partner or partners are not interested at the beginning, or just not wanting to get involved in that, they would tell you, even in marriage counseling, if the other partner is not willing to participate, where do you start? Start with you. You get some support, you get some help, you get some guidance and direction. Chances are, Trevor, there's a great illustration. I'm going to let you give it because you give it so well, the mobile.
Yeah, so like a mobile over a baby over a crib. If you touch one thing on that mobile, it all starts to move. It all starts to move. So that one thing that you can always put in motion is you. And we don't always control where things are going to go, but we can put it in motion if we want to start to make progress moving forward.
Yeah, so good, for sure. One of the things that we do offer that I get so excited when I get the opportunity to do is a jumpstart for partnerships. And we've even got a Rhapsody business assessment that is specific to partners and gets so much clarity around areas where they are in sync and areas where they're not in sync, and that there may be some clarity that needs to be brought to the table. So it's a great conversation piece, and certainly if you're interested in doing a jumpstart for partners, you can reach out to me, and I'm able to connect you, or if you're already connected to a coach, to ask them about that as well. We are next month, we're going to be talking about accountability. And very excited to dive in. It's going to fit into partnerships. Those of you that are watching on Facebook, watching the video, thank you so much for being a part of this. And certainly check out the Rhapsody Strategies website. There's lots of videos from all of these webinars are stored on there under a section. I think it's called webinars, right, Trev?
Yep.
Is the tab, and you can find all of the past webinars on there as well. So thank you again for joining us on the call for the live version. I do appreciate everybody being a part of that. All right, we are no longer, well, we're live, but we're no longer recording live. So let's open it up for those of you that are on the Zoom call. You really do get a special invite that some that are on Facebook don't have the opportunity, where they can be a part of this call, and just to open it up. Love to hear some of your thoughts. Some of you that are either in partnerships, or you've had to, if you got some specific questions or some best practices that you've had, that you've experienced, certainly like to open it up to anyone that'd like to share.
Not all at once.
Just one at a time. Yeah, just one at a time. It's hard when you're all talk over each other.
I know.
How many of you that are, those of you that are on the call, now I know there's only about half of you have your screens on, but you can, even with the thumbs up thing, how many of you are either currently in a partnership, or you've certainly been a part of a partnership? Yeah. Oh, look, Trev put his thumbs up.
And
many,
well,
yeah.
I record my status as it's complicated, but yeah.
What's the thing that has worked? What have you really found that has worked well? Guy, I see you've unmuted. Go ahead.
Well, I'm in a partnership for a long time. It was like a couple, and we got a baby. We have a new partner since well, a couple of years, not
Yeah.
even 2 years yet. But the baby is kicking and taking a lot of place. She wants to make her place. That's great, and she's the one that is pushing us. That's wonderful. But I like the comparison with a family. That's
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, in our next coaching call, I'm going to have to talk to you about that use of that kind of example, especially when she's on the call as well. So she's hiding. But yeah, there you go. She's laughing about it.
That's so
I
good.
think that's a great, and that is a dynamic when you've got, and even at Rhapsody, for example, Rhapsody, you had Eric and Trevor were partners. I was an independent coach. I was part of the team. And then came into the partnership after it had already started. And I remember us initially, those early days of having to change some habits on how things, right? Sometimes some of the things that would happen, we'd be like, oh, we can't do it that way anymore. And so that's a unique dynamic, is when you are bringing another partner into an organization. And Guy, in a perfect example there, where Amelia comes in and has some great ideas and wants to really help it grow and stretch, that can be a challenge for sure.
It was healthy for us because it really did require us to reassess how we were doing things. Right? And it forced us to be more deliberate and more intentional, and kind of go, oh, there's some things that are drifting here. We need to lock these down. And you keep revealing that, right? That fog metaphor, Eric, I really love that one as well. It's continuing to eliminate areas of fog and ambiguity. But a lot of times people don't want to go near them. They want to leave them alone. And that can really come back to cause serious damage in some cases. So
the avoidance of issues only causes further problems. I can't emphasize that enough. I think if you've got a positive mindset about conflict in terms of it's an opportunity as opposed to a problem, where we run into conflict or challenges in the relationship at the leadership level, these are opportunities to understand why. What's behind that? What's really going on here? What systemically needs to change? What do we need to clarify that's unclear? What do we need to adapt? How do we need to adapt our approach to this? These are opportunities to have very honest conversations. And if we create opportunities to check in, right? How are we doing? I mean, some of the strongest couples I know, that have a very healthy relationship, they check in with each other regularly. How are we doing? Is there anything we need to talk about? And these become opportunities again for change.
Yeah, so true. Yvonne, I see you were gonna maybe jump in, and then also Steve.
Yes, I unmuted. I'm just curious, and Trevor could speak to this a little bit more because he knows about my business, but I'm forming multiple partnerships with multiple clients. And if you have any suggestions or wherewithal on how to juggle that.
Run! No, just kidding.
That's right. Don't do it.
Don't.
Shut it down. Just shut it down. Call it a day. I'm okay with that too.
Getting really specific of what you're trying to accomplish in the partnership. So if it's kind of a supplier relationship, like that kind of like a working partnership as opposed to an ownership partnership, Yvonne, then with those relationships, you have to be even more deliberate about what is the nature of the exchange here and how are we going to do that. If it's a trade for service, it's even more critical to get very, very explicit and specific about what are we trading, because that's actually extraordinarily difficult to get right over time. Because if I have a service that gets delivered up front and you have one that goes on for a year, I do mine up front and you're delivering yours, but then month after month, it feels like a long time since I've done anything and you're still and it's really easy to get a little out of whack around that. And so to be really, really clear about it. But I would say the other thing is around values and goals. Like your values are about how you do things And if those values are not aligned, then I think you're going to run into issues inevitably. I would say when there's conflict in a partnership and you're trying to work it through, and sometimes there's some scary things that partners are avoiding. One thing you can do is you can move up the level of abstraction and keep going to a level until you align. And maybe it's all the way at vision or mission or your values or the annual goals. And you say, yes, we both want to accomplish this 100%. You want that? I want that. Exactly. Yeah. Well, then you can start to say, well, what are our options around that? But if you try and start down here and you're really diametrically opposed, get to a place where you do agree and use that as your starting point, your foundation for your next conversations. Yeah, so I'd encourage those two things.
Okay. Yeah.
Stephen.
I've got some wonderful friends and new clients and new business owners on the call here today, and they are their family, two sisters and the in-laws merging to do a brand new exciting business adventure. Nice. What would you say for families? You mentioned, and I know I coach married couples and families. What are some tips on married couples or family-owned businesses that you've learned?
You know, one that I'll jump in and then that I certainly have said, and I chuckle only because I've got one client that was a husband and wife, and when I talked about this, they went out, they literally did this, is I talked about knowing which hat you're wearing in that moment. Are you wearing husband-wife hat or are you wearing business partner hat? And they actually went out and got hats that said wife, husband, and then business. And then they had business hats, their CEO and CTO or whatever their roles were. And they would switch the hats. But part of it is to know when you're having a conversation that's a family conversation and when you're having a conversation that's a business conversation. And I think to be able to keep those separate. That's true of friends as well. Now, when I get together with Eric and Trev and we're hanging out, we're going to talk about the business because we are passionate and we love our business. And that's part of, we love to do that. But we're also very deliberate when we're having business conversations and when we're not, and knowing that separation. That's one of the things I would throw out though, is really defining when you are functioning in which role and keeping those clear with each other. Eric, Trev?
I love that, Rob, because it's, in many cases, the advice is often don't bring home work conversations home and vice versa. And that's it's unrealistic. It's not, you're human beings. You cannot just shut off an entire part of who you are and expect it not to show up in the other place. But I think clarifying in those moments, listen, we need to have a conversation about, I know we're home and we're not supposed, but we've got this crisis or whatever. Can we just put this hat on and have this conversation? I think that is so brilliant, and it actually saves couples from this trying to live in this unrealistic. The two things are completely separate because they're not. I think everything we said on the call today on steroids. If you're with family and husband and wife, only because again the potential there's already pressure. Right, it's a meaningful relationship that our experiences pressure on another front. So if you're not clear about how are we going to do conflict together, what are we going to do when we don't agree, how are we going to have difficult conversations, and often this is going to require either some training or some support on your side. Like I strongly encourage that. How many here have ever been trained to have difficult conversations? Probably nobody, right? And yet we need to have them on a regular basis. So investing in, and a great book I'll recommend, by the way, is Crucial Conversations. Just some great practical advice on how to have tough conversations together, but getting on the same page about how are we going to do this. And I advise you to do it before you get into trouble, right? Set the bound. It's like, when do you prepare a shareholders agreement? When the partners are ready to kill each other? No, right? You do it during peacetime when things are good. And then that shareholders agreement is going to guide how we get through this rough patch. So to me, guiding principles even more important than that, because they speak of our values, they speak of what we have agreed to that we can remind each other of, right? So all this stuff's important. If it's family-based, husband and wife, even more so, as far as I'm concerned.
Would you add anything, Trev? Catherine, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead, Catherine. You go.
One thing that we haven't talked about on this call yet is the business partner agreement, that gets written up by the lawyer. And if you go and have that conversation with your lawyer, an awful lot of these things that we're talking about, they get covered in that. And so if you're being proactive in setting up your business relationship and you're already going to get the business partnership agreement written up, some of those things get covered. So it's a great way to get that, your foot in the door and get practicing having those really in-depth conversations.
Yeah, no, it's a
It's
good
a
point.
great
for
suggestion.
Sure. Yeah,
It's a great suggestion. Maybe I'll add a couple thoughts. So I'm going to assume it's too late to say don't do it. So no, I'm just kidding. It's just a joke. I think to Eric's point, you have to elevate everything else we talked about already. It has to happen at a higher level. And I would say you've already done the right thing. You got Steve. You need some. No, Steve, I'm not sucking up. I really mean it. The one, you've got the right person, but two, you also need someone to guide you through it. Eric, Rob, and I, we're pretty functional. We're pretty capable. We kind of do this for a living, and we have a coach we work with who navigates us through this to deal with. My hand went up when you said around difficult conversations. Yes. She has walked us through. How do you do this? How do we approach this? How do we talk about these things? How do we find alignment? Can you be upset and stay in relationship with each other? Can you disagree strongly and still be in good relationship with one another? But you see, when you do it within a family context, you have all this other stuff layered on top of it as well. So I would really elevate that. I would be crystal clear in your communication, especially as you're transitioning in and out of work during the day. You need to know, when has your partner started their work day, or your sister or your in-law, and when are they done, and when are they just, I just need to let off some steam from work because this person I work with is driving me crazy, right? Like, how will you have that conversation, and when will you know that you're just letting off steam as opposed to actually trying to solve the business problem? And I think that's where, whether it's hats or, no, sorry, I got my slippers on. I don't do business with slippers on, so I can't do it. Whatever that signal is, whether you just say it or find a visual cue, I think you really need to manage those boundaries really carefully. And you have to really respect that other person's boundaries, going, oh, my job here as their partner and as their family member is to help them, support them as they meet their needs and as they do what they need to do. This is a moment where I get to do that. And that should be a real honor as well. So that would be, I think, the only thing I could add to this.
Yeah, and I would just say, Eric made the comment about the best time to do this is, when things are going well. That's, but the reality is, if things aren't going well, it's still the right time to do it.
Yes.
And it, in that context, if all of a sudden things are a mess, get that stuff into place because it's needed. But I would stress, as you've heard a number of times, you can't do it alone, and it's almost impossible. I think everyone needs a coach or that outside voice, no matter what type of business you have. I think partnerships even more so. It is such to have that person who can step in and provide that insight, who is not, there's no skin in the game, can bring so much value to that. So listen, this has been a great conversation. Really do appreciate those of you that were able to stick around right until our 4:45 time and add some extra comments and thoughts to this. As I mentioned, there will be an email going out talking about accountability and the date and everything. It's, again, as we always do, it's the third Wednesday of the month. And so you can expect to see that, but we'll be sending out the exact details and the timing and all of that stuff well in advance, so you can make sure to have it in your schedule as well. So thank you everyone for spending part of your Wednesday with us. Hope you found some insight into this. And again, please feel free to reach out to any of us if you've got additional questions or you want to have that conversation. We're more than happy to do that with you. So thank you everyone. Have a great rest of your day.